She entered the CEO's private suite and found him half naked, smoldering with desire, waiting to claim her. A powerful, heartwarming love story filled with passion, longing, and undeniable romance. Every second will leave you breathless. Don't miss a single moment. Hi, my very beautiful and more precious than diamond and gold family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories, where love, passion, and deep emotions bring us together as one special family. Today, I have a very important and special message for you, a prayer straight from my heart to yours. Heavenly Father, bless my beautiful family, who are more precious than diamond and gold. Fill their lives with love, strength, and endless joy. Protect them, guide them, and let success follow them in all they do. Keep our bond unbreakable and our hearts full of love. Amen. My family, I have made up my mind. I will take full control of this channel because I cannot lose you. Your love, your comments, your shares, they mean everything to me. Now I need more from you. Invite your friends, bring them into Mr. Peter's family. I know many of you comment that YouTube doesn't recommend my videos to you, and that is a big problem, but we can fight this together. Liking, commenting, and sharing helps the videos reach more people. That's why I need every single one of you to take action. Only 5 days left and 2,700 subscribers to go. I trust you, my family. We will rise again. Are you still with your brother, Mr. Peter? Please like and comment on this. Each member of my family, take this seriously. It will take just 1 second of your time, but it means the world to me. Let's start with love. Chapter 1. Collision of Broken Hearts. The 65th floor of Malrick Tower cut through Manhattan's sky like a blade of steel and glass. Inside, Zafira Elian waited, her portfolio clutched against her chest, the gentle tap of her heartbeat, keeping time with the seconds passing on the antique grandfather clock. 5 minutes until her appointment with Soren Malrick, the man whose name was whispered in boardrooms with equal parts reverence and fear. Ms. Elian? The assistant's voice broke through her thoughts. Mr. Malrick will see you now, Zafira, straightening the sleek black dress that accentuated every curve of her body. At 34, she had rebuilt herself into one of New York's most sought-after interior designers, transforming spaces with the same meticulous care she'd used to reassemble her shattered heart after her divorce. The doors to Soren Malrick's office opened without a sound. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that spoke of power but lacked a soul, all chrome, glass, and emptiness. Then she saw him. Soren Malrick stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. 6'3" of coiled power in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit that did nothing to hide the broad shoulders beneath. When he turned, Zafira's breath caught in her throat. The photographs in business magazines hadn't captured the electricity of him. The intensity of steel blue eyes set in a face sculpted from sharp angles and hidden shadows. At 40, he wore success-like armor, but his eyes held something else, something broken. Ms. Elian. His voice was deep, with rough edges that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. I expected someone older. Zafira raised an eyebrow, refusing to be intimidated. I expected someone less presumptuous, Mr. Malrick. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but a crack in the mask. You have quite the reputation. They say you don't just design spaces, you read the people who inhabit them. People are easier to read than they think. She held his gaze, a silent challenge. And what do you read in me, Ms. Elian? He gestured toward the leather chair across from his desk, an invitation. Someone who surrounds himself with beautiful things, but never allows himself to enjoy them. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or warning. I'm not hiring you for psychological analysis. No, she said, opening her portfolio. You're hiring me because every designer in Manhattan has failed to create a space you can actually call home. The words hung between them, a truth neither expected to acknowledge. My penthouse needs renovation, not my psyche. His voice had softened, almost imperceptibly. The spaces we inhabit reflect the spaces within us, Mr. Malrick. Zafira placed her portfolio before him. I don't separate the two. He studied her work in silence, long fingers tracing the images of rooms she'd transformed. Each page turned with deliberate precision, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked up. The commission is yours, but I have conditions. I expected nothing less. The penthouse is private. No publicity, no portfolio additions, and absolute discretion regarding anything you see or hear there. Of course, I want to be consulted on every decision, no matter how small. She nodded, though a small voice warned her that this level of control suggested wounds running deeper than she dared probe. And finally, he said, rising to his full height, if at any point I decide this isn't working, the contract ends, immediately and without explanation. Most designers would have balked at such terms. Zafira simply extended her hand. Agreed. When their fingers touched, something electric passed between them, a current of recognition that startled them both. His hand engulfed hers, warm and strong, and for a fraction of a second neither moved. Their eyes locked, and in that suspended moment, walls built over years threatened to crumble. Soren withdrew first, a barely perceptible step back. My assistant will handle the paperwork. When can you begin? Tomorrow, she said, surprised by the eagerness in her voice. I'll need to see the space first, of course. I'll have a car take you there this afternoon. He turned back to the window, a clear dismissal. 3 o'clock. As Zafira gathered her materials, she felt his eyes, following her movements, though he hadn't turned around. At the door, she paused. Mr. Malrick? He half turned, the sunlight casting half his face in shadow. Whatever happened to make you stop trusting beauty? I won't let it interfere with my work. His expression hardened. What makes you think anything happened? Because, she said, softly, I recognize the look of someone who's been betrayed by something they loved. Before he could respond, she closed the door behind her. The private elevator to Soren Malrick's penthouse moved in silent, velvet-smooth precision. Zafira adjusted her silk blouse, mentally preparing for the space she was about to enter. The rumors about Soren Malrick's personal life were sparse but consistent. A marriage that had ended spectacularly 5 years ago, leaving him even more isolated than before. No relationship since, at least none public enough to make the gossip columns. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a space that confirmed every instinct she'd had in his office. The penthouse was breathtaking in its architecture, soaring. Ceilings, walls of glass, rare materials from around the world. But it felt like an elaborate hotel suite, not a home. Everything was impeccable, expensive, and utterly impersonal. I see why you need me, she murmured, setting down her leather portfolio on a marble island that dominated the kitchen no one had ever cooked in. Is that so? The voice startled her. Soren emerged from a hallway, his suit jacket gone, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up to expose muscular forearms. Without the fortress of his office around him, he seemed both more approachable and more dangerous. You live in a museum, Mr. Malrick. She gestured to the pristine surroundings. Beautiful but untouched. It protects the exhibits, but it keeps life at a distance. A shadow passed over his features. Perhaps that's precisely what I want. Is it? She held his gaze, refusing to look away. Or is it what you've convinced yourself to accept? For a moment, she thought she'd gone too far. His jaw tightened, eyes darkening with something that might have been anger, but instead of dismissing her, he moved toward the wall of windows overlooking Central Park. My previous designers were too intimidated to speak honestly. His voice carried a note of reluctant admiration. You don't seem to share that affliction. I left fear behind when I rebuilt my life, Mr. Malrick. She approached, stopping several feet from him. It's a luxury I can no longer afford. He turned, studying her with new interest. What happened? I think you know the broad strokes. She traced her finger along the cold marble countertop. A marriage, a betrayal, the humiliation of discovering you weren't enough for someone. Who promised you were everything? His expression shifted, the armor slipping to reveal a flash of raw understanding. In that moment, they recognized each other, survivors of the same war, carrying different but equally devastating scars. Show me, he said quietly, what you would do with this space. Zafira opened her portfolio, spreading preliminary sketches. Across the island, as she explained her vision, Soren moved closer, the subtle scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something darker, filling her senses. When he leaned over her shoulder to examine a detail, his breath warm against her neck, she felt her pulse quicken. This wall, she indicated, her voice steady despite the heat rising within her, needs to come down. It's blocking natural light and the flow of energy. His hand brushed hers as they both reached for the same sketch. The contact was brief but electric, sending a current through her body that she hadn't felt in years. Their eyes met, and for a suspended moment neither moved. And what else, he asked, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate through her. Would you change? The double meaning hung between them, charged with possibilities neither was ready to acknowledge. Everything that doesn't serve you, she answered, holding his gaze, and nothing that does. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a tension in his jaw releasing. He stepped back, creating distance between them, but his eyes never left hers. I believe, he said, we have an understanding, Ms. Elian. Zafira, she corrected him, if I'm going to transform your most private space, we should at least be on a first-name basis. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Zafira, then. The way he said her name, each syllable given weight and texture, made her heart skip. And you may call me Soren when we're here. Not in the office. She couldn't help but tease, surprising herself with the ease of it. The office has different rules, but there was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before. As she gathered her sketches, his hand lightly touched her wrist. The contact was brief but intentional, sending warmth spiraling through her body. I don't let people in easily, he said, his voice low. Into my home or otherwise. Zafira looked up at him, at the vulnerability behind the steel, and made a decision she hoped wouldn't break her all over again. Then I'll have to prove I'm worth the risk, won't I? The air between them charged with unspoken promises, possibilities, neither had allowed themselves to consider until this moment. And as the golden afternoon light spilled through the windows, illuminating them both in its glow, something awakened that they had each believed long dead. Hope. Chapter 2. Unraveling Defenses. 3 weeks into the renovation, Soren's penthouse had transformed from sterile perfection into organized chaos. The morning light filtered through temporary coverings on the massive windows, casting dappled shadows across rolls of blueprints and material samples. Zafira moved through the space with quiet authority, directing workers with precision born from years of experience. She hadn't expected Soren to be present today. He typically maintained his distance, reviewing her progress in scheduled evening meetings where tension simmered between professional courtesy and something far more dangerous. Yet as she turned the corner into what would become the new library, she found him examining the partially constructed bookshelves, his fingers tracing the raw wood. "You're supposed to be conquering Wall Street today," she said, unable to hide her surprise. Soren turned, and the sight of him in casual attire, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders, momentarily stole her breath. Without his corporate armor, he looked younger, more approachable, yet no less commanding. "I cancelled my meetings." His eyes, the color of a storm-tossed sea, tracked her movements as she approached. "I wanted to see the progress firsthand." Translation: "You wanted to make sure I wasn't ruining your multi-million-dollar penthouse." She smiled to soften the accusation. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but closer than she'd seen before. "I trust your vision, Zafira." Surprisingly, high praise indeed. She gestured to the shelves. "What do you think?" "They're perfect." His voice carried a warmth that wrapped around her. "How did you know?" "Know what?" "That I've always wanted a proper library." His eyes held hers, searching. "I never mentioned it." Zafira stepped closer, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne. "I told you the first day, I read people. These shelves aren't just for show, they're for someone who finds solace in words." She paused, studying the planes of his face. Someone who escaped into books when reality became too harsh. Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps at being truly seen. For a moment, his defenses wavered, revealing the man beneath the billionaire. "What else do you see?" he asked, his voice lowered to an intimate register that seemed to vibrate through her. Before she could answer, a crash from the kitchen shattered the moment. With reluctance visible only in his eyes, Soren stepped back. "I should let you work," he said, the mask slipping back into place. As he turned to leave, Zafira's voice stopped him. "Stay!" The word hung between them, weighted with possibilities. "I mean, if you want to see the process, you should see it all. The good, the bad, the unexpected." Their eyes held for a heartbeat too long. Then Soren nodded once. "I'll stay. Out of your way." But throughout the day, Zafira felt his presence like a physical touch, his eyes following her as she directed contractors, his occasional questions revealing a mind that absorbed every detail. By late afternoon, when the workers had departed, leaving them alone in the half-transformed space, the air between them hummed with unacknowledged tension. "Drink?" Soren gestured toward the temporary wet bar she'd established in the corner of the living room. "Please." He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his movements precise and elegant. When he handed her the crystal tumbler, their fingers brushed, a momentary contact that sent electricity dancing across her skin. Outside, dark clouds had been gathering, a summer storm approaching with unexpected speed. As Zafira sipped her whiskey, expensive and smooth, warming her from within, the first rumble of thunder rolled across the city. "I should go before the weather turns," she said, though everything in her yearned to stay. "Stay." Soren echoed her earlier word, the single syllable carrying weight. "We have details to discuss, and I've ordered dinner." Before she could respond, lightning split the sky, followed almost immediately by a thunderclap that seemed to shake the building itself. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the penthouse into darkness. "Perfect timing." Soren's voice came from somewhere closer than she expected. "I assume a man who plans for every contingency has candles." Zafira kept her voice light, despite the sudden intimacy of darkness. His low chuckle warmed her more effectively than the whiskey. "Wait here." She listened to his confident footsteps navigating the darkened space, wondering how he moved with such certainty. Minutes later, a warm glow bloomed as he returned with several pillar candles, arranging them on the coffee table between them. In the flickering light, his face transformed, shadows accentuating the strong line of his jaw, the candlelight softening the hardness around his eyes. Without the harsh overhead lights, he looked less like the ruthless CEO and more like a man, with secrets he might be willing to share. "You're staring," he said softly. "You look different in this light." The words escaped before she could censor them. Different how? More real. She met his gaze across the dancing flames. Less defensive. Instead of retreating as she half expected, Soren leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the position bringing them closer than they'd ever been. Perhaps the dark makes it easier to be honest. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows with percussive fury. Inside, a different kind of storm brewed between them, one made of unspoken desires and carefully guarded truths. "Tell me something honest then," Zafira challenged, drawing her legs beneath her on the sofa. Soren studied her for a long moment, as if assessing risk. Then, with a deliberate movement, he rolled up the sleeve of his sweater, revealing a jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. "I didn't grow up in penthouses and private schools," he said, his voice rough with memories. "I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens with a father who used his fists to communicate and a mother who disappeared a little more each day." Zafira's breath caught in her throat. She reached out instinctively, her fingers hovering above the scar before gently tracing its length. His skin was warm beneath her touch, the muscle beneath tensing at the contact. "This came from trying to protect her," he continued, watching her fingers on his skin. "I was 12. He broke my arm in 2 places, then refused to take me to the hospital until the next morning, when he could fabricate a story about a bicycle accident." "How did you survive that?" she whispered. "Books. The public library 3 blocks away became my sanctuary." His eyes met hers. "And determination. I promised myself that one day I would build a fortress so impenetrable that no one could ever hurt me or anyone I cared about again." The rain created a cocoon around them, isolating them from the world outside. In that private universe, Soren's defenses continued to unravel, revealing the boy who had fought his way out of poverty, the young man who had worked night shifts to put himself through college, the rising executive who had caught the eye of his predecessor's daughter. Eliza was beautiful, sophisticated. "Everything I thought I wanted," he said, refilling their glasses. "I believe she saw something in me that others missed, potential beyond my rough edges." "Did she?" Zafira asked, knowing the answer from the shadows in his eyes. She saw an ambitious man she could mold and manipulate. Bitterness edged his voice. "For 5 years, I thought we were building something together. I gave her everything, my trust, my name, my heart. Then I discovered she had been systematically stealing corporate secrets, selling them to competitors, while sharing my bed." The betrayal hung in the air between them, raw and festering despite the years. "Did you love her?" The question escaped before Zafira could stop it. Soren's eyes, when they met hers, held centuries of pain. "I loved who I thought she was. That was my first mistake, seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was really there." Lightning illuminated the room in stark white, casting their shadows against the wall. 2 figures, separate yet somehow connected in the brief flash. "Your turn," he said softly. "Something honest." Zafira took a steadying breath, then slowly removed the wide gold bracelet she always wore. Beneath it, a thin white scar circled her wrist. "My husband didn't use his fists," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "He used words, silence, and eventually other women." Soren's fingers captured hers, turning her wrist to examine the scar in the candlelight. And this. After I discovered his third affair, I was lost. The memory still carried shame, though she had fought hard to overcome it. He had convinced me that I was difficult to love, that his infidelity was somehow my failure. One night I thought ending everything would hurt less than continuing to live as someone unworthy of faithful love. His hand tightened around hers, warm and strong. "What stopped you?" "The absurdity of it," she said with a small, sad smile. "I realized I was ready to die because a man who couldn't recognize real worth had told me I had none. It was like being willing to burn down the Louvre because someone colorblind said the paintings were worthless." A sound escaped him, something between a laugh and a sigh, and the tension in the air shifted, softened. "So instead of ending my life, I ended my marriage," she continued. "I discovered that the woman he had tried to diminish still existed beneath the doubt and fear. I built my business from nothing, forcing myself to recognize my own value when no one else would." "And now you transform spaces," Soren said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. "Because you transformed yourself." "We're more alike than you might think," she admitted. "We both built fortresses. Mine just has better interior design." His laugh, genuine and unguarded, transformed his face, revealing a man few had ever seen. The sound wrapped around her heart, tugging at something she had believed long buried. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside something had shifted between them. As they talked into the night, the candlelight casting golden shadows across their faces, defenses carefully constructed over years began to crumble. When Soren spoke of his childhood dreams, Zafira found herself sharing her own. When she described her journey to rebuild her self-worth, he listened with an intensity that felt like physical touch. Somewhere between whispered confessions and comfortable silences, they discovered in each other something neither had expected to find again: understanding. Hours later, as the storm finally began to subside, Zafira found herself curled against Soren's side on the sofa, her head resting against his shoulder. His arm had found its way around her, protective yet gentle, his fingers absently stroking the silk of her blouse. "The power's still out," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. She responded, too comfortable to move. "Good thing. We have candles?" "Good thing," he echoed, his voice carrying a note she hadn't heard before: contentment. In the soft glow of dying candles, with the gentle patter of rain as soundtrack, they sat in companionable silence. Neither mentioned how inappropriate this closeness might be, how dangerous. For this moment, suspended between professional boundaries and personal longing, they simply existed together. Two survivors finding unexpected shelter in each other's presence. When Zafira finally stirred, reluctantly pulling away from his warmth, Soren's eyes held hers in the dim light. Something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of a connection neither had sought, but both now recognized. "It's late," she said softly. "I should go." "Stay." The word hung between them, layered with meaning beyond the simple syllable. When she hesitated, he added, "The guest room is prepared. It would be irresponsible to send you out at this hour." The rational part of her knew she should leave, maintain professional distance. But something stronger, something that had awakened during their night of shared truths, made her nod. "Thank you," she said, standing slowly. "For the candlelight, for listening, for..." She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the gift of vulnerability he had given her. Soren rose as well, his height making her tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. For a breathless moment, she thought he might close the distance between them, but instead, he simply reached out, his fingers gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you," he echoed, "for seeing me. The real me." As he led her to the guest room, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, Zafira understood that something fundamental had changed between them. The barriers they had built against the world and against each other had begun to crumble. In their place, something new was taking root, fragile, unexpected, and terrifying in its potential. Morning would bring reality back, with its complications and professional boundaries, but for tonight, in a penthouse transformed by darkness and truth, they had found something neither had been looking for. A beginning. Chapter 3. Dangerous Territory. 6 weeks transformed Soren Malrik's penthouse. From cold perfection into something extraordinary. Zafira had infused every corner with warmth and character, rich textures, subtle colors, and carefully curated pieces that told a story of sophisticated comfort rather than untouchable luxury. Today marked the final reveal, the culmination of her vision and his trust. Her heart fluttered with uncharacteristic nervousness as the elevator ascended to the penthouse. Since that night of candlelit confessions, something had shifted between them. Their professional meetings had gained an undercurrent of awareness that neither acknowledged directly. His eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. She found herself choosing outfits with him in mind. They danced around the connection growing between them, maintaining the facade of client and designer, while both sensing the ground shifting beneath their feet. Zafira arrived early, wanting to make final adjustments before Soren saw the completed transformation. The elevator opened directly into the foyer. She had redesigned with warm bronze fixtures and textured wallpaper that caught the light like silk. The penthouse was silent, the afternoon sun streaming through the new sheer draperies she had selected to soften the harsh city light. "Mr. Malrik?" she called, setting down her portfolio on the console table of reclaimed walnut she'd commissioned from an artisan in Brooklyn. No answer. Following the path of sunlight, she made her way through the living room, now a haven of comfortable elegance with its deep cushioned sofas and carefully placed art, toward his private suite. This area had been her greatest challenge. Soren had initially resisted any changes to his most personal space, relenting only after weeks of careful negotiation. She hesitated at the threshold of his bedroom, then pushed the door open. "Soren, I wanted to check the final..." The words died in her throat. Soren stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his powerful back to her, wearing only unbuttoned dress pants that hung dangerously low on his hips. Water droplets from a recent shower traced paths down the muscled expanse of his shoulders, catching the amber light of late afternoon. At the sound of her voice, he turned, surprise evident in his expression. "You're early," he said, his voice a low rumble that sent heat cascading through her body. Zafira knew she should look away, excuse herself, maintain the professional boundary that grew thinner by the day. Instead, she remained frozen, her eyes taking in the sight of him, the broad chest dusted with dark hair, the defined abdomen, the subtle scar that wrapped around his ribs that she now knew came from his father's belt. I can come back," she managed, her voice betraying her with a slight tremor. "Stay." The command was soft but unmistakable. He made no move to cover himself, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. "I've been waiting for you." The double meaning hung in the air between them, charged with weeks of unspoken desire. Zafira stepped fully into the room, his sanctuary, and closed the door behind her. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden stillness. For a moment, neither moved, the air between them electric with possibility. Then, Soren broke the spell, reaching for a shirt draped Across the bed, she had selected for him an imposing piece of hand-carved mahogany that dominated the room. "I apologize," he said, though his eyes conveyed no regret as they held hers. "I lost track of time." "No need to apologize," she replied, finding her professional voice again. "This is your home." His fingers paused on the buttons of his shirt. "Is it a home?" The question carried weight beyond the simple words. Zafira crossed to him, close enough to catch the clean scent of his skin, the subtle notes of his cologne. "That's what I promised to create for you," she said softly. "Not just a beautiful space, but somewhere you belong." Something shifted. In his expression, vulnerability replacing the mask he showed the world. "And have you succeeded, Zafira?" Her name on his lips still affected her, even after weeks of hearing it. "That's for you to decide." She gestured to the room around them, the perfect blend of masculine strength and unexpected comfort. "Does it feel like somewhere you want to be?" Soren's eyes never left hers. "It feels like somewhere I never want to leave, especially at this moment." The implication hung between them, impossible to ignore. Zafira took a steadying breath, struggling to remember why maintaining professional distance had seemed so important. Before she could respond, Soren stepped away, creating space between them. "Show me the rest," he said, finishing with his shirt buttons. "I want to see everything you've created." The tour of the completed penthouse unfolded with charged awareness. Soren following as Zafira explained her choices for each transformed space. She had honored his initial requests while gently pushing boundaries, introducing elements of warmth, texture, and personal history that transformed sterile luxury into true sanctuary. In the library, leather-bound classics filled shelves she'd designed to echo those in the public library of his childhood. In the living room, subtle lighting created pools of warmth rather than antiseptic brightness. The kitchen, previously unused, now invited with professional-grade appliances and a massive island of honed granite where people might actually gather. Throughout, Soren asked thoughtful questions, his genuine appreciation evident in the way his fingers traced the material she'd selected, the way his eyes took in details only someone who truly saw the space would notice. But beneath the professional interaction, awareness simmered, of his proximity when he stood beside her, of the brush of his hand against hers when they examined the same feature, of the way his eyes returned to her even when discussing the room around them. As sunset painted the penthouse in gold and amber, they finished in the private rooftop garden she had transformed from barren concrete into an oasis of container trees, comfortable seating, and subtle lighting. The Manhattan skyline spread before them, a tapestry of lights beginning to twinkle against the deepening blue. "This," Soren said quietly, standing beside her at the edge of the garden, "exceeds everything I could have imagined." "I'm glad," she replied, warmth spreading through her at his approval. "Not just the space," he clarified, turning to face her fully. "This entire experience, working with you." He paused, something vulnerable crossing his features. "Knowing you." The professional pretense between them wore thin as tissue paper, ready to tear at the slightest pressure. Zafira knew she should leave now, with the project complete and her professional obligations fulfilled. Instead, she found herself saying, "We should celebrate." Soren's smile, rare and transformative, made her heart stutter. "I had the same thought." He hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Have dinner with me tonight. Not as client and designer. Not here." "Where?" she asked, already knowing her answer regardless of his reply. "There's a place in the village, small, private. No one who would recognize either of us." The implication was clear. Somewhere they could simply be Soren and Zafira, without titles or expectations. "Yes," she said simply, His relief was visible, a tension releasing from his shoulders. "I'll have a car waiting downstairs in an hour." The restaurant was everything he had promised, intimate and discreet, tucked away on a quiet street with only a dozen tables bathed in the warm glow of candlelight. Zafira had returned to her apartment to change, selecting a deep burgundy dress that draped her curves in silk, revealing enough to intrigue but not enough to seem deliberate. When Soren had seen her emerge from her building, his expression, hungry and appreciative, had sent heat pooling low in her abdomen. Now, seated across from him at a corner table, with excellent wine warming her veins and his undivided attention making her feel more desirable than she had in years, Zafira allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been fighting for weeks. She was falling for Soren Malrik. "I've never brought anyone here," he confessed, his fingers playing with the stem of his wineglass. Without his usual armor of tailored suits and corporate power, dressed instead in a charcoal sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders, he looked younger, more approachable, still commanding, but softer at the edges. Why me? The question had hovered at the edges of her mind since that first meeting, when something had sparked between them, despite all their defenses. Soren considered her across the flickering candle, his eyes reflecting the flame. "Because you see me, not the CEO, not the net worth, not the reputation. From that first day in my office, you've seen parts of me I thought I'd buried too deep for anyone to find." The honesty between them felt as intoxicating as the wine. Throughout dinner, their conversation flowed without the careful boundaries they'd maintained during the project. Zafira sharing stories of her childhood dreams of creating beautiful spaces. Soren revealing the literature that had shaped his thinking during his rise from poverty to power. They discovered shared tastes in music, contrasting opinions on art that led to playful debates, and a mutual appreciation for the kind of silence that feels like conversation rather than its absence. When their hands met over the table, fingers intertwining with deliberate intent, neither pulled away. And when Soren's thumb traced circles on her palm, the same intimate gesture from that candlelit night, Zafira felt the touch echo throughout her body. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," she challenged as they shared a decadent chocolate dessert, the rich flavor and echo of the moment's indulgence. Soren's eyes held hers, serious despite the lightness of their previous conversation. "I've convinced myself that keeping people at a distance was strength," he said quietly, "that needing no one made me invulnerable. But these past weeks with you have made me question whether I've been strong or simply afraid." The confession hung between them, honest and raw. Zafira reached across the table, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Vulnerability takes more courage than isolation ever will." He turned his face into her touch, his lips brushing the sensitive skin of her inner wrist, in a gesture so intimate she felt it like a current through her body. "Your turn," he murmured against her skin. Zafira took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would irrevocably change whatever existed between them. "I've told myself that maintaining professional boundaries with you was about integrity," she said, holding his gaze. "But the truth is, it's been about fear. Fear that what I feel when I'm with you is too powerful to control." Something dangerous and beautiful flickered in Soren's eyes. Without looking away, he signaled for the check. The ride back to her apartment passed in charged silence, their bodies separated by inches that felt like both nothing and everything. When his hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat, fingers interlacing with quiet certainty, Zafira knew they had crossed a threshold from which neither wished to return. Outside her building, Soren instructed the driver to wait, then escorted her to the door. In the soft glow of the entry lights, he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the intoxicating blend of wine and cologne, and something essentially him. "Zafira," he said her, name a caress from his lips. "I don't want to rush this. Whatever this is between us, it matters too much for carelessness." The consideration in his words, the respect underlying them, made her want him more, not less. She reached up, her fingers threading through the short hair at the nape of his neck, drawing him closer until barely a breath separated them. "Some risks," she whispered against his lips, "are worth taking." The first touch of his mouth against hers was gentle, questioning, a stark contrast to the powerful man the world knew. But when she sighed against him, her body melting into his embrace, something broke loose in Soren. His arms encircled her, one hand splayed possessively across her lower back, the other tangling in her hair as he deepened the kiss with an intensity that stole her breath. Zafira responded with equal fervor, years of carefully maintained control crumbling beneath the onslaught of desire. Her hands explored the solid strength of his shoulders, the powerful muscles of his back, while his mouth claimed hers with increasing hunger. When his lips trailed from her mouth to the sensitive skin below her ear, a soft moan escaped her, the sound seeming to inflame him further. "I should go," he murmured against her neck, though his arms tightened rather than released. "If I don't, leave now." The implication hung between them, heavy with promise and warning. Zafira pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, finding his eyes dark with desire that matched her own. "Or you could stay," she offered, the invitation clear in her voice. For a heartbeat, temptation warred visibly on his features. Then with visible restraint, Soren pressed his forehead against hers, his breath coming faster than normal. "Not tonight," he said, the words clearly costing him. "Not because I don't want to. God knows I've thought of little else for weeks. But I want to do this right, Zafira. Whatever happens between us, I want it to be more than one night of giving in to what we've both been fighting." The respect in his restraint touched something deeper than desire. Zafira nodded, though her body protested the decision. "Tomorrow, then," she said, allowing a smile to curve her lips, "take me somewhere, anywhere, just us, without pretense or portfolios or projects between us." Soren's smile, genuine and unguarded, transformed his face. He pressed one more kiss against her lips, gentler but no less potent than before. "Tomorrow," he agreed, "though how I'm supposed to sleep tonight knowing how you kiss is beyond me." His honesty startled a laugh from her, breaking the tension between them with something lighter yet no less meaningful. As he stepped back, his fingers trailing reluctantly from hers, Zafira felt certainty settle in her chest. They had entered dangerous territory, where professional lines blurred, where past hurts might resurface, where vulnerability created the possibility of new wounds. But as she watched him return to the waiting car, his tall frame silhouetted against the night, she knew with absolute clarity that some dangers were worth facing. Some fires worth the risk of being burned. Chapter 4. Ending. As Soren led her back toward the penthouse, his hand warm and certain in hers, the velvet box remained on the table behind them, not forgotten, but waiting for the perfect moment that would come when they were both truly ready. Not tonight, with emotions still raw, from near misunderstanding, but soon. The promise of it followed them down the stairs, into the warmth of the home she had created for him, and eventually into his bed, where passion finally found its full expression between them. Not as escape or mere physical release, but as the deepest form of communication between two souls learning, at last, to trust again. In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened beyond what either had dared to hope. The incident on the rooftop, the almost proposal, the misunderstanding, the reconciliation, had shown them both how fragile and how resilient their connection could be. Each day, they chose each other anew, building something neither had believed possible after their respective heartbreaks. Chapter 5. Beginning. You're dating Soren Malric. The Soren Malric. Maya's eyes widened over her wineglass. Disbelief painted across her features. The same man Forbes called Manhattan's most ruthless CEO. Zafira smiled, used to her best friend's protective skepticism. This dinner, at her favorite neighborhood bistro with her 3 closest friends, had been inevitable. 2 months into their relationship, it was time for these separate parts of her life to intersect. The very same, she confirmed. And before you start, he's nothing like the headlines suggest. Men rarely are what they seem at first, Amara cautioned, the bitter divorce she'd survived evident in her tone, especially powerful ones. We're just worried, Layla added gently. After David... Soren isn't David, Zafira interrupted firmly. I wouldn't be with him if he were. Chapter 6. Fractured Trust. It's perfect, Zafira said, watching as the jeweler closed the sleek black box containing the platinum band she'd selected. 3 weeks had passed since the rain-soaked almost proposal in Central Park, and in that time, a certainty had crystallized within her. If Soren was hesitating to ask again, perhaps it was her turn to take the leap. The ring was understated, but distinctive, brushed platinum, with a single line of black diamonds embedded flush in the metal. Masculine, yet elegant, like the man who would wear it. As she slipped the box into her purse, a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration coursed through her. He's a lucky man, the jeweler remarked, handing her the receipt. I'm the lucky one, she replied, and meant it. In the weeks since the storm, something had deepened between them. Soren's vulnerability that day, the panic attack that revealed the depth of his childhood wounds, had stripped away the final barriers between them. Each night since, he had shared more of his past, exorcising ghosts in the safety of her arms. And each morning she had awoken to find him watching her with wonder, as if still unable to believe she hadn't fled from his darkness. Tonight would change everything. She'd planned it meticulously, an intimate dinner at his penthouse, now as much her home as his own apartment. The ring waited in her purse, a weight both thrilling and terrifying. The penthouse was silent when the elevator doors opened, but not dark. Candles lined the entryway, their golden light creating a path deeper into the space. Music played softly, the jazz playlist she'd created for him months ago when she'd first designed this space. Soren, she called, setting down her purse carefully. On the console table, ensuring the ring box remained hidden. No answer, but the trail of candles beckoned her forward through the living room toward his bedroom. Their bedroom, as it had become. Her heart quickened as she followed the flickering light, anticipation building with each step. The bedroom door stood ajar, more candlelight spilling from within. Pushing it open, she froze at the threshold. Soren stood by the floor-to-ceiling. Windows, shirt unbuttoned to reveal the muscled expanse of his chest, his powerful frame silhouetted against the city lights. He turned at the sound of her arrival, his eyes darkening as they traveled the length of her body. I was beginning to think you weren't coming, he said, his voice a low rumble that sent heat spiraling through her. Traffic, she managed, her mouth suddenly dry at the sight of him, the man who had become her world, looking at her with such naked desire. He crossed to her in 3 fluid strides, one hand sliding into her hair as the other encircled her waist, pulling her against him, with gentle but irresistible force. His mouth claimed hers with an intensity that made her knees weaken, months of intimacy having taught him exactly how to kiss her senseless. I missed you today, he murmured against her lips, his hand already working at the zipper of her dress. It's only been 8 hours, she teased, her own fingers busy with the remaining buttons of his shirt. 8 hours too long. Her carefully constructed plan began to dissolve as clothing fell away, as his hands and mouth traced familiar paths that somehow remained thrillingly new. The ring, the proposal, they could wait. This moment, this connection between them, demanded precedence. Later, she thought hazily as he lifted her onto the bed, later I'll ask him. I love you, Zafira whispered into the darkness, her body still humming with aftershocks of pleasure, her head resting on Soren's chest. His heartbeat had just begun to slow beneath her ear, his fingers tracing lazy patterns along her spine. He shifted, tilting her face up to his. In the dim light filtering through the windows, his expression held something she'd never seen before. Complete peace. I love you, he responded, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. More than I believed possible. This was the moment. She pressed a kiss to his chest, then sat up, drawing the sheet around her. I need to get something from my purse. His eyebrow raised in curiosity, but he made no move to stop her as she slipped from the bed, his eyes appreciative on her silhouette as she wrapped herself in his discarded shirt. Don't move, she instructed, warmth filling her chest at his. Soft laugh. I'll be right here, he promised. The walk to the entryway seemed longer than before, anticipation making her hands tremble slightly as she reached for her purse. The velvet box felt warm in her palm as she withdrew it, her mind racing with the words she would say, the future they would build together. Then she heard it, a sharp, demanding knock at the front door. Frowning, she glanced at her watch. Nearly 11, far too late for any expected visitor. The knock came again, more insistent. Soren, she called, hesitating with the ring box in her hand. Are you expecting someone? She heard his footsteps. Then he appeared in the hallway, hastily dressed in pants and an unbuttoned shirt. His expression had shifted from relaxed to alert, the CEO replacing the lover in the space of seconds. No, he said, moving past her, toward the door. Stay back. The command in his voice made her instinctively comply, though she remained in the hallway watching as he checked the security panel beside the door. Whatever he saw there made him freeze, his entire body tensing like a predator preparing to strike. Impossible, he muttered, the word sharp with disbelief. The pounding resumed, followed by a voice, male, rough with age and something harder. I know you're in there, boy. Open the goddamn door. Zafira's breath caught at the sudden transformation in Soren's stance. Shoulders rigid, fists clenched at his sides, a tremor running through his powerful frame. She'd never seen him like this, coiled with a tension that seemed ready to explode into violence. Soren, she ventured, slipping the ring box into the pocket of his shirt that she wore. Who is it? When he turned to her, his eyes held a darkness that made her take an involuntary step back. My father. The two words carried decades of pain, a history she'd heard in fragments during their nights together. James Malrick, the man who had broken Soren's arm when he was 12, who had terrorized his mother until her spirit shattered, who had disappeared from his life 20 years ago after one final brutal confrontation. What are you going to do? She asked softly. For a moment, indecision warred in his expression. Then, with mechanical precision, he buttoned his shirt, straightened his shoulders, and moved toward the door. I'm going to find out what he wants, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to hearing. And then I'm going to make sure he never comes back. The coldness in his tone sent a chill through her. This was a side of Soren she'd never encountered, the ruthlessness that had built his empire, that had crushed competitors without mercy. Let me stay with you, she said, but he shook his head. No. Wait in the bedroom. When she hesitated, his expression softened fractionally. Please, Zafira, I don't want him to even look at you. The protectiveness in his request made her nod reluctantly. She retreated to the bedroom, though she left the door ajar, unable to abandon him completely to whatever confrontation awaited. From her position, she could hear the front door open, could hear the low rumble of male voices. One familiar, one carrying the rougher edges of age and hard living. The conversation started low, then escalated rapidly. Need money, that's all. You got plenty to spare. Get out, Soren's voice cold and final. Is that any way to speak to your father? After all these years, you lost the right to that title the first time you raised your hand to my mother. Steel beneath the quiet words, a harsh laugh. Still playing the protector? Fat lot of good it did her in the end. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. When Zoran spoke again, his voice had dropped to a register that prickled the hair on Zafira's arms. You have 30 seconds to leave this building before I call security. If you ever come here again, if you ever attempt to contact me, I will destroy you so thoroughly that prison will seem like salvation. Do you understand? The naked threat delivered with the calm certainty of someone with both the means and will to fulfill it, hung in the air. Then came shuffling footsteps, a muttered curse, and finally the sound of the door closing. Silence descended on the penthouse, thick and oppressive. Zafira waited, giving Soren space to process whatever emotions the encounter had stirred. When he didn't return after several minutes, she ventured out, finding him standing motionless by the windows, his back to the room. The city spread below him like a carpet of stars. Soren? She approached cautiously, uncertain of his state of mind. He's dying, Soren said without turning. Liver cancer, final stages. He came for money, for treatments the prison doctors say won't work anyway. The flat tone of his voice worried her more than anger would have. She moved closer, not quite touching him. I'm sorry, she offered, though the words felt inadequate. Are you? Now he turned, his eyes cold in a way she'd never seen. He beat my mother until she became a shadow. He broke my bones and called it discipline. He is the reason I built walls around myself that took you months to breach. His laugh held no humor. I'm not sorry. I'm only sorry he didn't die sooner. The darkness of the sentiment shocked her, though she understood its source. Still, this vengeful, merciless man seemed a stranger compared to the one who had held her with such tenderness an hour before. What did you tell him? She asked quietly. That I would pay for hospice care. Nothing more. His jaw clenched. Even that is more than he deserves. Zafira reached for him, her hand settling on his arm. The muscles beneath her fingers were rigid with tension. You're a better man than he ever was. Something flickered in his eyes, doubt perhaps, or fear that she was wrong. He stepped away from her touch, moving to the bar to pour himself a generous measure of scotch. Am I? He asked, tossing back the amber liquid in one swallow. Because right now, I'd happily watch him suffer, just as he made her suffer. What kind of man does that make me? The vulnerability behind the harsh words tugged at her heart. Human, she answered simply. It makes you human, Soren. He poured another drink, his movements precise despite the emotion radiating from him. You should go. The abrupt statement caught her off guard. What? You should go home tonight. He wouldn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the glass in his hand. I'm not. I need to be alone. The dismissal stung more sharply than she expected. The ring box felt heavy in the pocket of his shirt that still enveloped her. This was not how she had imagined the evening unfolding, not with walls slamming back into place between them, not with the stranger who had replaced the man she loved. Running away won't help, she said gently. Let me stay. Let me help you through this. I don't need help. The words came too quickly, too harshly. I need space. Understanding dawned. This wasn't about her. It was about his fear of what she might see in him now. The darkness he'd tried to keep hidden, the capacity for cruelty he'd inherited from the very man he despised. Okay, she agreed finally, recognizing that pushing would only drive him further away. But Soren, this changes nothing between us. His eyes, when they finally met hers, held both longing and doubt. Doesn't it? You just saw a side of me I never wanted you to see. I've always known it was there, she countered. It's part of what makes you who you are. The strength that helped you survive him, that built your empire, that protects what you love. She moved closer, daring to cup his face between her palms. I love all of you, Soren. Not just the parts that are easy to love. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd reached him. Then he gently disengaged, stepping back to recreate the distance between them. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, the promise feeling hollow in the chasm that had opened between them. As Zafira dressed and gathered her things, the proposal ring, still hidden in his shirt pocket where she'd slipped it, she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd lost something precious tonight. Not just the perfect moment she'd planned, but a trust that had been building between them. In the elevator descending from the penthouse, she pressed her hand against the pocket holding the ring. The timing had been wrong, catastrophically so, but the intention remained. She would ask him, would offer him forever, when the shadows of his past weren't standing so vividly between them. If only she could shake the nagging fear that they were moving too fast, that perhaps they both carried wounds still too raw for the commitment she'd been ready to make tonight. Chapter 7. The Edge of Breaking. 2 weeks of distance stretched between them like an ocean. After his father's appearance, Soren retreated into work, their communication reduced to brief calls and texts that carried professional courtesy but lacked the intimacy they'd cultivated. Zafira gave him the space he requested, though each night she opened her drawer to stare at the ring box, a tangible reminder of promises not yet made. She missed him with an ache that surprised her, not just the physical presence of him, but the small moments, his quiet focus as he read beside her in bed, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he absently traced patterns on her skin while they talked. Her apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt hollow without his occasional presence. Even her work suffered, designs lacking the inspiration that had flowed so naturally when her heart was full. Each evening, she found herself checking her phone, hoping for more than the perfunctory messages he sent. Thinking of you. Hope your day went well. Polite, distant, nothing like the passionate declarations or thoughtful observations that had characterized their relationship before his father's appearance. She understood his withdrawal. The confrontation had exposed wounds still raw beneath his carefully constructed exterior. But understanding didn't ease the hollow ache in her chest, or the fear that perhaps he had decided she'd seen too much of his darkness. When he finally called on a Friday evening, his voice carried an unfamiliar hesitation that made her heart skip. I've been unfair to you, he said without preamble. I pushed you away when I should have held you closer. I'd like to make it up to you if you'll let me. Can you pack for the weekend? Something warm for the evenings? Nothing formal. Hope bloomed in her chest, though she tempered it with caution. When? I'll send a car in an hour, he replied. If that's not enough time. It's enough, she interrupted, unable to hide the eagerness in her voice. I'll be ready. The hour passed in a flurry of activity, selecting clothes with deliberate care, including the silk nightgown he'd once admired, and without overthinking the decision, tucking the ring box into a side pocket of her overnight bag. Not with definite plans, but with recognition that opportunities once missed might not present themselves again. The car delivered her not to Soren's penthouse as she'd expected, but to a private helipad where he waited beside a sleek helicopter. wind from the idling rotors tousling his normally perfect hair. The sight of him after 2 weeks, more casually dressed than usual in dark jeans and a navy sweater, made her breath catch. Their greeting was tentative, a brief embrace, a chaste kiss, both of them navigating the new carefulness between them. Only when they were airborne, the city falling away beneath them, did he finally speak beyond pleasantries. "I owe you an explanation," he said, his voice barely audible over the helicopter's hum. "And an apology." "You don't owe me anything," she countered gently. "You needed space, I understand that." "What I needed," he corrected, reaching for her hand, "was to stop punishing us both for my father's reappearance in my life. It took me too long to realize that." His fingers interlaced with hers, the first real connection in 14 days. "Where are we going?" she asked, changing the subject to give him time. "Somewhere we won't be interrupted," he promised, a hint of his usual confidence returning. "Somewhere I can properly make amends." Hours later, Soren's private helicopter descended toward a secluded beach property on the eastern shore, a modern glass structure perched on dunes overlooking the Atlantic. As the pilot departed with instructions to return Sunday evening, leaving them truly alone, Zafira felt the weight of anticipation settle between them. "No phones, no interruptions," Soren promised, taking her hand as he led her inside. "Just us." The house was stunning. Walls of glass framing endless ocean views, minimalist furnishings in warm woods and creams that invited touch. A fire already burned in the massive stone hearth, champagne chilled beside it. Someone had prepared the house, but now they were completely alone, miles from the nearest neighbor. "This is beautiful," she breathed, moving to the windows where waves crashed against the shore, foam glowing white in the fading light. "It's the first property I bought when the company began to succeed," he explained, coming to stand behind her. "My refuge when the city feels too confining." "You've never mentioned it before." "I've never brought anyone here before," he admitted softly. "It's always been just mine." The significance of this, his sharing a space he'd kept private even from her, settled around her like a warm embrace. He was offering more than an apology. He was extending trust that had momentarily wavered. "I've missed you," he admitted as they stood in the great room, the setting sun painting everything gold. His hands framed her face with reverent gentleness, "More than I've allowed myself to say." The kiss that followed spoke of longing and apology, of barriers being dismantled brick by careful brick. His lips moved against hers with growing urgency, weeks of separation igniting a hunger neither could contain. His hands slid beneath her blouse, warm against her skin, drawing a soft gasp from her lips as he backed her slowly toward the bedroom. "Wait," she murmured against his mouth, though her body protested the interruption. "We should talk first." Pain flickered across his features. Not rejection, but recognition that some wounds needed words before touch could fully heal. "You're right," he conceded, pressing his forehead to hers. "Always the wiser of us." He led her to the sofa facing the fireplace, pouring champagne with hands less steady than usual. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the new tension lines around his eyes, evidence of the difficult weeks behind them. "When my father appeared that night," he began without preamble, "it wasn't just the shock of seeing him, it was realizing how easily I could become him." "You are nothing like him," Zafira insisted. "You didn't see me afterward," he countered, shame evident in his voice. "After you left, I destroyed things, furniture, artwork, in a rage I couldn't control." His hands tightened around the champagne. "Flute." It terrified me, how similar it felt to his outbursts. "The same blood runs in my veins, Zafira," the same capacity for violence. "There's a difference between having capacity and choosing action," she said quietly. "We all contain multitudes, Soren. What matters is which parts we nurture and which we restrain." "I pushed you away because I was afraid," he admitted. "Not of my father, but of myself, of what you'd witnessed, of what you might eventually see in me that I've spent a lifetime trying to excise." The vulnerability in his confession touched her deeply. Zafira moved closer, taking the glass from his hand and setting it aside. "Do you know what I actually saw that night?" she asked, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "A man protecting himself from pain in the only way he knew how. A man so determined not to become his father that he would rather lose me than risk causing me harm." Something shifted in his eyes, hope replacing shame, tentative but real. "How do you always manage to see light where I see only shadow?" he whispered. "Because I love all of you," she answered simply. "Not just the parts you deem acceptable." The declaration hung between them, honest and raw. For a moment, neither moved. Then with deliberate gentleness, Soren pulled her into his arms, his embrace communicating what words couldn't fully express: gratitude, relief, homecoming. They barely made it through the doorway to the bedroom, her fingers already working the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel him against her. When he lifted her onto the bed, her legs wrapped instinctively around his waist, bringing him impossibly closer. "I dreamed of this," he confessed against her throat, teeth grazing the sensitive skin there, making her arch against him. "Every night we were apart." "Show me," she challenged, her hands finding his belt buckle. What followed transcended mere physical reunion. Each touch carried meaning beyond pleasure, his hands mapping her body as if ensuring she remained real, her, lips tracing the scars that marked his skin, both visible and invisible. They moved together with the synchronicity of lovers who knew each other's bodies intimately, yet with the wonder of rediscovery after absence. When he entered her, the sensation of completeness brought tears to her eyes. Soren kissed them away, his movements deliberate, almost reverential. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, the words a vow more binding than any legal document. "I will never shut you out again." That night, they reconnected with passionate intensity, their bodies communicating what words had failed to express. Each touch carried deeper meaning: reconciliation, homecoming, promise. His name became a prayer on her lips as he moved within her, deliberate yet desperate, relearning the geography of her body while mapping new territories of desire. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight spilled across the bed, Zafira sensed his walls finally coming down. "My father's appearance made me question everything," he confessed, his voice low in the darkness, fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Not my feelings for you, never that, but whether I deserve what you offer." "Why wouldn't you deserve love?" she asked, pressing a kiss to his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong beneath her lips. "Because I saw myself in him that night, the capacity for cruelty, for coldness. The Malric legacy." His arms tightened around her. "I was afraid you saw it too, and would finally understand what you're binding yourself to." Zafira rose on her elbow to face him, moonlight silvering the planes of his face. "I saw a man protecting himself from pain. Nothing more, nothing less." His hand cupped her cheek, wonder in his eyes. "How do you always see the best version of me, even when I can't see it myself?" "Because it's the true version," she whispered, lowering her mouth to his. Their passion reignited with this new level of honesty between them, gentleness giving way to urgency as they came together again, chasing the connection that made them feel most alive. His hands and mouth claimed her with possessive worship, her body responding with complete surrender that demanded equal vulnerability from him. They fell asleep tangled together, the past 2 weeks of separation dissolving in renewed trust and tender passion. Morning brought sunshine streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and a sense of possibility. Zafira woke to find Soren watching her, his expression soft with an emotion that made her heart swell. "What?" she murmured, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. "Just memorizing this moment," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The way the light catches your skin, how peaceful you look when you're sleeping beside me." "Always. The observer," she teased gently, though his words touched her deeply. They spent the morning in domestic tranquility, sharing breakfast on the terrace, walking barefoot along the private stretch of beach, talking of everything and nothing. The ease between them had returned, but with a new depth, as if the temporary separation had only strengthened their foundation. Over coffee, watching dolphins play in the distance, Zafira made her decision. It was time. She'd brought the ring, tucked safely in her overnight bag, determined to ask the question that had been interrupted before. "Walk with me?" she suggested, returning to the bedroom to slip the ring box into her pocket while Soren cleared their breakfast dishes. They strolled along the private beach, waves lapping at their bare feet, fingers intertwined between them. The morning air carried the crisp scent of salt and potential. When they reached a small cove, sheltered by natural rock formations and perfectly private, Zafira turned to him. "Soren, these past months have shown me what real partnership can be," she began, her heart pounding. "With you, I found someone who challenges me to be better while accepting me exactly as I am. Someone who understands that real strength isn't about absence of fear, but courage despite it. I want..." His phone rang, the intrusive sound shattering, the perfect silence. Soren frowned. He'd promised no interruptions, had even mentioned turning it off. He started to silence it, then froze as he glanced at the caller ID. "It's Marcus," he said, apology already in his eyes. "My COO never calls on weekends unless..." "Answer it," she nodded, the ring box suddenly heavy in her pocket. The conversation was brief but devastating. With each passing second, Soren's expression darkened, the carefree lover replaced by the formidable CEO before her eyes. "How bad?" he demanded. Then, "No, don't confront them yet. Secure what you can. I'll be there in 2 hours." He ended the call, tension radiating from his powerful frame. "Someone accessed our secure servers. Proprietary designs, client information, acquisition plans. Everything's been compromised." "Your deputy?" she asked, remembering the trusted executive he'd mentioned several times. "And my head of security. Working together." His jaw clenched, betrayal evident in every line of his body. "We built the security protocols together. They knew exactly how to bypass them." The weight of this new betrayal hung in the air between them. Another breach of trust in a life marked by them. "I have to go back," he said, already reaching for his phone to recall the helicopter. "The board is meeting in emergency session. Millions are at stake, possibly the company itself." The perfect moment shattered around them like glass. As Soren made calls and arranged their immediate return, Zafira watched their carefully planned weekend of reconciliation dissolve into corporate crisis. "I'm sorry," he said between calls, genuine regret in his eyes. "I know how important this weekend was for us." "The company needs you," she replied, understanding though disappointed. "It's part of who you are." He pulled her close for a brief, fierce embrace. "This isn't over," he promised against her hair. "Just delayed. Again." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Another attempt at deeper commitment, interrupted by forces beyond their control. As they gathered their belongings and locked up the beach house, Zafira couldn't help but wonder if the universe was trying to tell them something. On the helicopter ride back to Manhattan, she studied his profile. The CEO fully in command again, issuing directives with cold precision. The vulnerable man from last night had vanished behind the armor of professional necessity. Yet occasionally, between calls, his hand would seek hers, a reminder that beneath the corporate warrior beat the heart of the man who had held her through the night. "It's fascinating," she said during a rare, quiet moment. "What is?" he asked, distracted, watching you transform. The way you compartmentalize, lover to CEO in the space of minutes. Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes before being carefully masked. "Does it bother you? The dichotomy?" "No," she answered honestly. "It's part of what makes you extraordinary. Your ability to be multiple things without diminishing any of them." Relief softened his features momentarily. "Most women in my life have resented the CEO part of me, the demands, the focus it requires." "I'm not most women," she reminded him, with a smile, "and I fell in love with all of you, remember? Not just the parts that are convenient." The gratitude in his expression spoke volumes. When they landed at the heliport, a car already waited for him. "I'll send someone for you," he promised, kissing her briefly. "This could take days to contain." "I understand," she said, though disappointment settled heavily in her chest, the ring box still weighing down her pocket. "Zafira," he paused halfway into the car, something vulnerable breaking through his professional facade. "What were you going to say?" On the beach, she smiled sadly, her fingers brushing the outline of the box in her pocket. "It can wait. This can't." As his car pulled away, taking him back to the Empire under attack, Zafira couldn't shake the feeling that forces beyond their control seemed determined to keep them apart at every pivotal moment. The universe, it seemed, had other plans for their love story. Chapter 8. Public Destruction, Private War. The corporate crisis consumed Soren for 8 days. Zafira received brief texts and apologetic late-night calls, hearing the exhaustion in his voice as he battled to save his company from the inside threat. She gave him space to fight this war, understanding that sometimes love meant patience rather than presence. When he finally appeared at her door, dark circles shadowed his eyes, but victory had restored his confidence. "It's over," he said, pulling her into his arms. "We caught them, contained the damage, and implemented new security protocols. The board is satisfied." That night, as they reconnected in the sanctuary of her bedroom, Zafira sensed a shift in him, a new determination beneath his tender touches. "I almost lost everything I built," he murmured against her skin. "It made me realize what truly matters, what I can't bear to lose." His meaning hung between them, unspoken but understood. 3 days later, an ivory envelope arrived at her office, an invitation to the annual Malric Foundation Gala, the most prestigious charity event of the season. Soren had mentioned it casually, saying only that he hoped she would accompany him. The formal invitation, embossed with silver and addressed specifically to her, suggested something more significant than a simple date. "He's never brought anyone to the gala before," her assistant whispered, eyes wide as she inspected the invitation. "Not once in 7 years." The night of the gala, Soren sent his personal stylist to assist her, along with a gift box containing a stunning sapphire necklace that matched her eyes. The message accompanying it read simply, "For new beginnings, S." When he arrived to escort her, his appreciation was evident in his heated gaze as it traveled the length of her in the midnight blue gown she'd selected. "You're breathtaking," he said, his voice rough with barely restrained desire. The ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum transformed for the occasion into a wonderland of lights and elegance. As they entered, conversation briefly stilled, all eyes turning to the notorious bachelor CEO and the woman on his arm. Soren's hand at the small of her back remained steady, possessive, as he guided her through introductions to board members, business associates, and the city's elite. "They're wondering who captured the uncapturable Soren Malric," he murmured against her ear, amusement coloring his tone. "And what are you telling them?" she asked, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. His eyes held hers with unmistakable intent. "That some treasures are worth surrendering for." Throughout dinner, Soren remained attentive yet distracted, checking his watch with increasing frequency. When the program portion of the evening approached, he excused himself briefly, conferring with the event coordinator in hushed tones. "Is everything all right?" Zafira asked when he returned. "Perfect," he assured her, signaling a waiter who approached. "With fresh champagne, a special vintage," he explained, watching intently as she accepted the crystal flute. Before she could take a sip, the lights dimmed, and the foundation director approached the podium to begin the program. Soren's attention fixed on the large screen behind the stage, anticipation evident in the tightening of his fingers around hers. "Before our keynote speaker, a special message from our founder," the director announced. The screen flickered, but instead of the expected charity video, a woman's face appeared, strikingly beautiful, cold, and vaguely familiar to Zafira. The room fell silent. "Hello, Manhattan elite," the woman said, her voice cultured but cutting. "For those who don't know me, I'm Eliza Malric, the ex-wife our generous host would prefer you forget." Beside her, Soren went rigid, his face draining of color. Whispers rippled through the audience as the woman continued. "Tonight you'll write checks to the Malric Foundation, believing in Soren's redemption story. Poor boy made good. But you should know what you're really supporting." What followed was methodical character assassination. With surgically precise cruelty, she revealed Soren's darkest secrets: his father's abuse, his mother's suicide attempt, the violent incident that had sent teenage Soren to juvenile detention. "Ask yourselves," Eliza concluded, her smile venomous, "can a man with such violence in his blood ever truly change? Or is the refined CEO merely a mask for the animal beneath?" The screen went black. In the stunned silence that followed, hundreds of eyes turned toward Soren. Zafira reached for him, but he was already standing, his expression carved from stone. "Soren," she began, but he was gone, cutting through the crowd with mechanical precision, ignoring the whispers that followed. Her first instinct was to follow, but the event coordinator intercepted her. Panic, evident in his expression. "Miss Elion, please, we need to salvage this somehow." By the time she extricated herself, Soren had vanished. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. The car he'd sent for her waited outside, the driver instructed to take her wherever she wished. The penthouse, she directed without hesitation. The private elevator opened directly into darkness. Only the city lights through the massive windows illuminated the destruction within. Furniture lay overturned. A vase she'd selected months ago shattered across Italian marble, books torn from shelves. "Soren?" she called, her heart pounding as she navigated the wreckage of the space she'd created for him. She found him in the bedroom, systematically destroying the last intact space. His tuxedo jacket lay discarded, bow tie hanging loose around his neck, knuckles bloodied from impacts with walls and furnishings. "Go home, Zafira." His voice carried no emotion, frighteningly empty. Instead, she stepped closer. "Talk to me, please." "What is there to say?" He laughed bitterly, gesturing to the destruction around them. "She showed them exactly who I am. the animal beneath the suit. That's not who you are, Zafira insisted, reaching for him. He jerked away, his eyes glittering dangerously. Isn't it? The things she said were true, every ugly detail. Past truths don't define present worth, she argued, refusing to be pushed away. I know who you are, Soren. Do you? Something shifted in his expression, calculation replacing rage. Then you know I was going to propose tonight. The revelation stunned her. What? He moved to the bar, pouring scotch with steady hands that belied his emotional state. There was a ring in your champagne glass. Quite dramatic, don't you think? The reformed monster asking the beauty to chain herself to him for life. Hurt bloomed in her chest at his mocking tone. Don't do this. What? Speak the truth? He drained his glass, refilling it immediately. Eliza did me a favor, really. Reminded me what happens when I forget what I am. And what are you? Zafira challenged, refusing to back down. His smile was terrible to behold, empty of everything that made him the man she loved. Damaged beyond repair, toxic to anyone foolish enough to love me. He turned away, dismissal in every line of his body. Go home, Zafira, while you still can. The cruelty was calculated to drive her away, to protect her from himself. Understanding. This made his rejection no less painful. This isn't over, she promised, voice steady despite the tears threatening. Not like this. His back remained turned as she left. The man she loved lost somewhere in the darkness of his own making. The diamond ring sat undiscovered at the bottom of a champagne glass, its promise temporarily extinguished by ghosts that refused to rest. Chapter 9. Ashes and Embers. 3 weeks passed without a word from Soren. Zafira buried herself in work, accepting a high-profile international project that demanded her complete focus. By day, she transformed spaces with her signature blend of elegance and comfort. By night, she battled the emptiness of a life suddenly devoid of the man who had become its center. You need to move on, Maya advised over coffee, concern evident in her eyes. He made his choice. But Zafira knew the truth beneath his cruel dismissal. It wasn't a choice. It was fear. The scandal from the gala had largely subsided, thanks to Soren's formidable PR team and Manhattan's short attention span for old scandal when new gossip emerged. Professionally, Malric Industries' stock took a temporary hit before stabilizing. Personally, however, the damage ran deeper. Her sources reported that Soren had withdrawn completely, canceling social engagements, conducting business remotely, becoming the phantom CEO who ruled through digital communiques rather than physical presence. On the 23rd day of silence, Zafira received an unexpected visitor at her office. Marcus Chen, her assistant announced nervously, Mr. Malric's COO. The man who entered moved with the contained precision of someone accustomed to navigating corporate battlefields. His expression revealed nothing as he declined her offer of refreshment. I won't waste your time, he said, his voice clipped. I'm here against my better judgment, but someone needs to know. Know what? Alarm sharpened her focus. Soren has transferred control of day-to-day operations to me. He's leaving for his property in Switzerland, indefinitely. His carefully neutral expression cracked slightly. He's running. The confirmation of her worst fears made her heart constrict. When? Tonight. Private airfield, 9 p.m. She nodded, once already calculating. Thank you. Marcus rose to leave, then hesitated. I advised him against pursuing a relationship with you, he admitted. I thought you might become another vulnerability, another point of attack. And now? His assessment was coolly professional. Now I think you might be the only one who can bring him back from the edge he's walking. After he left, Zafira cancelled her appointments and returned to her apartment. There, she retrieved the ring she'd purchased months ago, the ring that had witnessed multiple failed attempts at commitment. Its platinum band caught the light as she turned it between her fingers, the black diamonds, a perfect reflection of the man they were meant for. Dark brilliance contained in elegant strength. Decision made, she began to pack. The private airfield outside the city operated with discreet efficiency for clients who valued privacy above all else. Zafira's taxi deposited her at the perimeter gate at 8:30 p.m., where security predictably refused her entry. Ms. Elian, a uniformed pilot, approached, recognition in his eyes. "This is unexpected." Relief flooded her. "Captain Reynolds, you flew us to the Hamptons last summer." He nodded, glancing at his watch. "Mr. Malrick is already aboard. We depart in 20 minutes. I need to see him, please." Something in her expression must have conveyed her desperation, for after a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Follow me, quickly." The sleek private jet waited on the tarmac, stairs deployed, lights glowing within. Captain Reynolds escorted her to the entrance, then tactfully disappeared toward the cockpit, leaving her to face what waited inside alone. Soren sat motionless in a leather chair, documents spread before him, his back to the entrance. He'd lost weight, his shoulders rigid with tension beneath his impeccable suit. When the cabin door closed behind her, he spoke without turning. "I said no interruptions until departure, Reynolds." "Not Reynolds," Zafira said quietly. The stillness that overtook him was absolute. Slowly he turned, his expression transforming from shock to carefully constructed neutrality. "How did you find me? Does it matter?" She remained by the door, taking in the changes 3 weeks had wrought. Deeper lines carved beside his mouth, shadows beneath his eyes, a new hardness in his jaw. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye." It seemed kinder. His voice betrayed nothing of his thoughts. "To whom?" A muscle worked in his jaw. "What do you want, Zafira?" Directness seemed the only approach he wouldn't deflect. She moved forward, stopping a few feet from him. "I want you to stop running. From what happened at the gala, from what happened between us." "Nothing happened between us," he countered, his tone flat. "We had an affair. It ended. People move on." The deliberate diminishment of what they'd shared stung, but she recognized. The tactic, minimized to manage pain. "Is that what you tell yourself to make this easier?" Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or something more vulnerable. "What would you have me say? That I exposed you to public humiliation? That my past put a target on your future?" "I would have you tell the truth," she challenged. "That you're terrified because for the first time in your life, you can't control the outcome. You can't guarantee I won't hurt you, so you're hurting us both first." His laugh held no humor. "Very insightful. Is that what your friends told you? Poor Zafira, in love with a damaged man who can't love properly in return?" The cruelty was calculated, designed to push her away. Instead of retreating, she stepped closer. "Your ex-wife didn't broadcast anything I didn't already know," she said quietly. "Did you think I hadn't researched you before accepting the commission? That I didn't know about your father's abuse, your mother's struggles, your juvenile record?" Surprise flickered across his features before he mastered it. "Then you're more foolish than I thought. Or braver." She held his gaze steadily. "I knew who you were then. I know who you are now. The question is, do you?" For a moment, the mask slipped, revealing raw pain beneath. "I thought I did," he admitted, voice barely audible. "Until I saw 300 people look at me and see only the animal Eliza described. I looked at you and saw only the man I love," Zafira countered. The man who rose above his beginnings, who built something extraordinary from nothing, who trusted me with his heart despite every reason not to. Soren stood abruptly, turning to face the small window, creating physical distance to match the emotional barriers between them. It doesn't matter. What we had, what I thought we had, can't survive this kind of exposure. That's for us to decide together, she insisted. Not you alone, and certainly not your ex-wife. She orchestrated everything, he said suddenly, still facing away. The rooftop interruption when I first tried to propose, she paid your ex-husband's lawyer to call at exactly that moment. My father's appearance, she tracked him down, paid his medical bills to buy his cooperation. The corporate sabotage, the gala humiliation, all of it, methodically planned to destroy any chance we had. The revelation hung between them, pieces, falling into place. Why? Now he turned, bitter amusement twisting his features. Because she couldn't bear to see me happy when she wasn't. Because she believes if she can't have me, no one should. Understanding dawned, sharp and clarifying. And you're letting her win. The simple truth landed with visible impact. Soren's careful composure cracked, real emotion bleeding through for the first time. I'm trying to spare you, he insisted, a new vulnerability in his voice. This isn't just about my reputation. Anyone close to me becomes a target. She won't. Stop. I don't need to be spared. I need honesty. Zafira closed the remaining distance between them, close enough to catch the familiar scent of him, to see the pulse beating rapidly at his throat. I need you to fight for us as hard as you fight for everything else you value. Something shifted in his expression. The first hint of the man she'd fallen in love with, emerging from behind the walls he'd constructed. I've spent my life fighting, he admitted, the confession costing him visibly. I know how to build empires and outmaneuver competitors. I don't know how to protect what I love without losing it in the process. The vulnerability in his admission gave her hope. Zafira reached into her pocket, withdrawing the ring box she'd carried through every failed attempt. Then let me show you, she said, opening it to reveal the platinum band. I've been carrying this for months, waiting for the right moment. Maybe there is no perfect moment, only the choice to believe that what we have is worth fighting for. Soren stared at the ring, disbelief warring with fragile hope in his expression. You were going to propose to me? I still am. She took his hand, the first contact between them in weeks, sending electricity through her veins. I love you, Soren Malric, the CEO and the boy from Queens. The man who quotes poetry at midnight and the strategist who built an empire. The person you've been and the one you're still becoming. His fingers closed around hers, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. I don't deserve this chance. Love isn't about deserving, she countered gently. It's about choosing every day to build something meaningful together. For endless seconds, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then, with the decisive movement of a man accustomed to calculated risk, Soren pulled her into his arms. His kiss carried desperation, apology, and rekindled hope, the taste of a man finding his way home after being lost in darkness. When they finally parted, breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. I can't promise I won't fail sometimes, he whispered, that the darkness won't occasionally win. I'm not asking for perfection, she assured him, just presence, just the willingness to try. Outside, the jet engines began their warm-up sequence, the vibration humming through the cabin floor. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom, requesting final confirmation for departure. Soren's eyes held hers, decision crystallizing in their depths. Change of plans, Reynolds, he called, never looking away from Zafira. We're not going to Switzerland. No, she asked, hope blossoming in her chest. His smile, the first real one in weeks, transformed his face from haunted to handsome. No, I believe we have unfinished business in New York. His gaze dropped to the ring still held between them. Starting with your question, which I don't believe I've answered properly. As the engines powered down and silence fell around them, Soren Malrik made the most daring choice of his carefully controlled life. He surrendered to possibility, to vulnerability, to love. Yes, he said simply, taking the ring from its box and sliding it onto his finger. My answer is yes. Chapter 10. Written in Fire. Zafira received a cryptic message from Soren, a single key card to his private penthouse suite with a note that read, "One last time. Come alone." Her heart raced as she debated whether to go. After everything they'd been through, the failed proposals, the public humiliation, the near departure, they had spent 2 weeks reconnecting, rebuilding trust in the privacy of her apartment while avoiding the media attention that still occasionally flared. But the penthouse, they hadn't returned there since the night of his destruction. The memory of that evening still haunted her, finding him methodically demolishing the beautiful space she had created, his eyes cold and empty as he pushed her away with deliberate cruelty. Their reconciliation at the airfield had been profound, but fragile. What did this summons mean? Was he ready to fully reclaim their life together? Or was this some form of goodbye? Despite her misgivings, Zafira couldn't ignore the pull between them, the magnetic force that had drawn them together from their first meeting and refused to release them despite every obstacle fate had thrown in their path. She dressed with care, selecting a deep blue dress that skimmed her curves without being overtly seductive. This moment, whatever it brought, deserved dignity. The private elevator ride to the penthouse felt interminable, her reflection in the polished doors revealing both anticipation and trepidation in her eyes. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a transformation that stole her breath. Hundreds of candles illuminated the darkness, casting golden light across rose petals scattered on the floor. The penthouse, last seen in ruins, had been completely restored. Every element she had originally designed returned to perfect condition. The air carried the subtle scent of jasmine, her favorite flower. "Soren," she called, following the trail of petals and candlelight deeper into the space. No answer came, but the path was clear, leading toward his bedroom, where their last painful confrontation had occurred. With each step, memories overlapped. The joy of their first kiss, the passion of their lovemaking, the devastation of their separation. All centered in this space she had created for him, that he had destroyed in his pain, and now, apparently, rebuilt. The bedroom door stood ajar, more candlelight spilling from within. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open and froze at the threshold. Soren stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, shirtless, his powerful physique silhouetted against the city lights. The muscles of his back shifted as he turned at the sound of her entrance, revealing the familiar landscape of his chest, the scars she had traced with reverent fingers, the strength that had both sheltered and pushed her away. His eyes, when they met hers, burned with such raw desire and vulnerability that she felt it like a physical touch. "I told myself I wouldn't do this," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That I'd let you go. That even after what happened at the airfield, it would be safer, kinder, to maintain distance. But I can't breathe without you, Zafira." He crossed to her in 3 strides, lifting her into his arms with devastating gentleness. Their kiss ignited into something primal and consuming. Months of separation, misunderstanding, and reconciliation distilled into the press of lips and tongue. His hands sought the zipper of her dress with practiced ease, while hers explored the muscled expanse of his chest, tracing scars both old and new, physical marks that matched the emotional wounds they'd helped each other heal. "I had this entire place rebuilt," he murmured against her throat as her dress slipped to the floor. "Everything I destroyed that night, restored exactly as you designed it, every piece, every detail." The symbolism wasn't lost on her. What had been broken could be rebuilt, often stronger at the mended places. As clothing gave way to skin against skin, they reaffirmed their connection with the wordless language of touch and taste, passion intertwining with tenderness. Soren lifted her onto the bed with reverent determination, his eyes never leaving hers as he covered her body with his own. Each caress spoke of reclamation, not possession, but reunion. When he entered her with aching slowness, the sensation transcended physical pleasure, becoming communion of the deepest kind. "I love you," he whispered against her lips, the words both confession and covenant. "Every moment away from you has been hollow." Their bodies moved together with perfect synchronicity, building toward release that, when it came, left them both trembling and transformed. But unlike previous encounters, this joining carried weight beyond momentary pleasure. It was recommitment, rebirth, the forging of something unbreakable from elements that had been tested by fire. Hours later, tangled in silk sheets as thunder crashed outside, no longer a trigger for painful memories, but now a soundtrack to their reunion, they whispered promises against each other's skin, rewriting their story with every touch. "I never thought I could have this," Soren admitted in the darkness, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Not just desire, but peace. You've given me both." Zafira pressed closer, her head resting in the hollow of his shoulder, her leg draped possessively across his. "We've given each other both," she corrected softly. "That's what partnership means." "Partnership," he echoed, as if testing the word. "I like the sound of that." As dawn approached, casting first light across their entwined forms, Soren stirred, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I have something to show you," he said. Despite her protest at leaving their warm cocoon, he insisted, helping her into his silk robe that draped enticingly off one shoulder. He pulled on pants but remained shirtless, the intimate casualness of it making her heart ache with tenderness. He led her to his private rooftop garden, which had been transformed yet again. The space seemed to glow in the soft morning light, the city awakening beneath them. A small table for two awaited, champagne chilling beside covered dishes. "You did all this?" she asked, taking in the beautiful setting. "I wanted to create something worthy of you," he admitted, "of us." As they enjoyed breakfast overlooking Manhattan, Zafira couldn't help but remember all the interrupted moments that had come before. The rooftop proposal truncated by her ex-husband's call, the rainstorm confession derailed by his panic. Attack! The beach house question cut short by corporate crisis. Each attempt at deeper commitment thwarted by circumstances or their own wounds. "I've been thinking about what you said," Soren began, as they sipped mimosas in the golden morning light. "About choosing each other every day." Zafira nodded, savoring the simple pleasure of his company, without crisis or drama shadowing them. "It's the foundation of everything lasting." "I want to build something lasting beyond us," he said, an unusual hesitation in his voice. "Something that celebrates what you helped me discover, that beauty can heal, that spaces can transform lives." He handed her a leather portfolio, embossed with both their names. Inside, architectural renderings revealed a stunning building in the city's arts district. "The Elian Malric Design Institute," she read, wonder in her voice. "What is this?" "A school for disadvantaged youth interested in architectural and interior design," he explained, his enthusiasm warming his voice. full scholarships, apprenticeship programs, mentoring from the best in the field. As she turned, the pages, details emerged. Studios flooded with natural light, collaborative spaces designed for creativity, residences for students without stable homes. Every element reflected what she had taught him about space affecting mindset, about design as healing rather than mere aesthetics. We'll partner with community organizations to identify talent in underserved areas, he continued, watching her face as she absorbed the plans. Provide not just education, but pathways to careers, internships with leading firms. Her heart swelled as she examined the plans. This is extraordinary, Soren. There's more. He turned to the final page, which showed a familiar structure. I purchased the art gallery where we first met, before any professional relationship began. It will serve as the Institute's exhibition space, where students can showcase their work to the public. Tears blurred her vision as the significance registered. The place where it all started. Where we first saw each other, he confirmed, taking her hand across the table. I wanted to create something that would stand as testament to your vision, to what you showed me was possible. The depth of his gesture, building not just a life with her, but a legacy that would transform others' lives, overwhelmed her. This was Soren at his best, taking his resources and using them to create meaningful change, inspired by love rather than obligation. When did you plan all this? She asked, still processing the magnitude of his gift. A shadow of remorse crossed his features. During those weeks we were apart, I convinced myself it would be my parting gift to you, even if we couldn't be together. Something of us that would endure. Zafira rose from her chair, circling the table to sit in his lap, her arms encircling his neck. And now? Now it's just the beginning, he murmured, his arms tightening around her waist. Of everything we'll build together. As they kissed beneath the awakening sky, the first snow of winter began to fall around them, delicate flakes landing on their entwined forms, melting instantly against the heat they generated together. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. New beginnings, purity covering the scars of the past, beauty emerging from the coldest season. Move in with me, Soren said suddenly, pulling back just enough to meet her gaze. Not just occasionally, not just when it's convenient. Make this our home, together. The request, so domestic yet so profound, touched her deeply. Yes, she answered simply. His smile, rare and transformative, brightened the rooftop more effectively than the morning sun. I was prepared to present much more compelling arguments, he teased, relief evident in his voice. Save them, she replied, trailing her fingers along his jaw. I'm sure we'll find something to debate about throw pillows or kitchen organization. His laugh, genuine and unguarded, wrapped around her heart. This was the private Soren, the man behind the empire, the vulnerable soul beneath the armor. And he was hers, as completely as she was his. That evening, they stood in the empty art gallery that would soon become part of their shared vision. Moonlight filtered through skylights, illuminating the space where fate had first drawn them together years before. When a young designer visiting an exhibition had briefly locked eyes with a powerful CEO across a crowded room. A moment so fleeting, neither had recognized its significance until now. I remember you in a red dress, Soren revealed, his voice echoing in the empty gallery. Standing before that massive abstract canvas, looking completely unimpressed, while everyone around you pretended to understand it. Zafira laughed, surprised. And I remember you declining champagne because you were actually there to appreciate the art, not network. You seemed so out of place among the social climbers. I noticed you immediately, he admitted, your authenticity in a room full of pretense, but I wasn't ready then to recognize what I was seeing. Which was? His eyes softened as they held hers. My future, standing right in front of me, completely unobtainable because I couldn't yet see my own worth beyond what I'd built. And now? She asked, stepping closer until they stood mere inches apart. Now I understand that empires mean nothing without someone to share them with, he said, his voice low and intimate in the empty gallery. That all the success in the world is hollow if you face it alone. We recognize something in each other even then, she mused, her hands sliding beneath his jacket to feel the warmth of him through his shirt. Authenticity, perhaps. Potential, he countered, drawing her against his chest, even if we weren't ready to recognize it. As their bodies pressed together in perfect harmony in the gallery where their story had begun, they understood that their love wasn't just beautiful, it was legendary. A force of nature that broke every rule, healed every wound, and created something eternal from the ashes of their past. Their passion, once their greatest vulnerability, had become their greatest strength. A fire written into their souls that nothing in this world could ever extinguish. In the weeks that followed, they merged their lives with surprising ease. Zafira's touches appeared throughout the penthouse, fresh flowers in unexpected places, books of poetry on bedside tables, throws that invited lounging on previously pristine furniture. Soren's presence likewise transformed her workspace. State-of-the-art technology subtly integrated, improved lighting he'd noticed she needed, small notes of encouragement tucked between her design samples. The Design Institute broke ground. In spring, with Zafira taking the lead on its aesthetic development, while Soren handled the financial and administrative infrastructure. Together, they created something neither could have accomplished alone, a perfect metaphor for their relationship. Society's skepticism about their union gradually gave way to reluctant admiration. The power couple who had weathered public scandal emerged stronger, their joint philanthropic efforts silencing even the most persistent critics. Eliza's attempt to destroy them had instead forged something unbreakable. In the months that followed, they would face new challenges. The skepticism of society that didn't believe in second chances, the occasional resurgence of old fears, the logistics of merging two successful lives into one unified vision. But those challenges would be met together, each obstacle strengthening rather than weakening the bond between them. For Soren and Zafira had discovered the most profound truth about love, that it wasn't found in perfect moments or grand gestures, but in the choice to see each other completely, scars, strengths, shadows and all, and still say yes. Not just once, but every day, in 1,000 small moments of presence and faith. 1 year after their reconciliation, they stood again on the rooftop garden where so many significant moments had transpired. No elaborate setup this time, no carefully orchestrated surprise, just two people who had found in each other the courage to believe in second chances, in healing, in the possibility of complete acceptance. No thunder today, Soren observed, his arm around her waist as they watched the sunset paint the city in amber and gold. Zafira leaned into him, savoring his solid warmth. No interruptions of any kind, she agreed. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I've been thinking, he began, uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. We've done this all backward, haven't we? Living together before marriage, creating a foundation together before making formal commitments, breaking all the traditional rules. When have we ever followed the expected path? She asked, smiling. Never, he acknowledged, and I wouldn't change that. But there's one tradition I find myself wanting after all. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. different from the one that had featured in so many interrupted moments. When he opened it, a new ring gleamed inside, an intricate band of platinum and gold intertwined, neither metal dominant, but both strengthened by their union. "No diamond this time," he explained. "Nothing that speaks of ownership or conventional expectations. Just this, two elements stronger together than apart." Zafira felt tears gather as he continued. "Zafira Elian, I'm not asking you to be mine. I'm asking if we can continue being us, partners, lovers, friends, challengers, supporters. Will you marry me not because either of us needs completion, but because we've chosen to build something extraordinary together?" The yes that had waited through 5 interrupted proposals finally found voice, clear and certain. As Soren slid the ring onto her finger, she reached into her own pocket, withdrawing a matching band. "Great minds," she said softly, placing it on his palm. "I had the same thought, the same design created. 2 metals, inseparable once forged. Together," he laughed, the joyous, uninhibited sound she had worked so hard to unlock when they first met. As she placed her ring on his finger, completing the circle of their commitment, they both understood that this was merely formalizing what had existed between them from the moment their eyes first met across a crowded gallery. This was their beautiful life, not without darkness, but illuminated by a love strong enough to transform it into something extraordinary.